I'm Christy with Katie. We're here at the International AIDS Conference in Montreal, AIDS 2022. Government and community accountability and action are critical to supporting Indigenous-led responses to HIV. I spoke to Rene Boucher, an Indigenous person living with HIV and long-standing HIV activist, to hear his thoughts.
My spirit name is Gishaba Gijek. I come from the Loon Clan, and I'm from Lac Seul First Nation, and I'm Ojibwe. My English name is Rene Boucher. I often just jokingly say my GST name is Rene Boucher. So I agreed to storm the stage. I was actually approached by a peer of mine, and somebody had dropped out that they wanted to have somebody Indigenous to go up and speak to Indigenous issues. So I agreed because as an Indigenous person living with HIV, when they told me some of the things that the reasons why they were storming the stage, I just identified with them. And one of the reasons was around the rise in rates of TB for people living with HIV. And as an Indigenous person, I can certainly get behind that because the rates of TB are rising in my region from where I come from. And I come from the Anishinaabe-Aski Nation territory and Grand Council Treaty 3. And many of those communities are flying communities, which I've worked in the last 25 plus years. And so when I heard the statistics coming out of that, I was like, well, this definitely impacts me. I definitely want to raise awareness around that. So that's one of the main reasons why I chose to go up there and speak to some of those things. Yeah. As you know, we don't have access to clean drinking water. And I think one of the presenters today had actually mentioned about how can we support people living with HIV, Indigenous people living with HIV, if we're asking them to take pills with their water and they don't have access to clean drinking water. And so that becomes a big issue that maybe somebody didn't think about. And it's something we should be thinking about because we're looking at these 95 targets. How can we as Indigenous people reach that if we don't have those social determinants of health to support us to get to that number? So I think it's a huge issue that the rest of Canada needs to be aware of. One of the things I've learned in my journey of living with HIV is I learned about my indigeneity. My mom was a residential school survivor, and having gone there, we never talked about it. So when I tested positive way back in the early 90s, it wasn't until 2006 that I found out my mom had actually gone to residential school. So all of that time of me living with HIV, I didn't understand how I was at extra risk for HIV because of that factor. And as I started to hear more conversations around that, I began to understand my own journey as an Indigenous person, because right from the beginning of my life, even before I tested positive, I did not know that I was Indigenous. And I think my mom did that to protect me because of her own experience of going to residential school. We were raised, I guess, right up until I was 12 years old, I thought I was white. I thought I was French. But it wasn't until we moved back to my mom's home territory that I found out, oh, you're Indigenous. Well, you're Indian, that's what I was told back in grade 3 or grade 4. No, actually grade 5. It was grade 5 I was told. And I was like, what? I'm Indian, like, what's Indian? You know, and so that started me on my journey of understanding, well, geez, am I different? Like, why am I being treated differently in this new territory I'm in? I really felt I was treated different, and I didn't know the difference up until that point. So I really strongly believe it's because of my learning about my culture, learning about my Indigenous ways, connecting with my Indigenous brothers and sisters, helped me to navigate my way of living with HIV from a holistic perspective, because oftentimes I was just taking care of my physical and my emotional. I didn't worry about my mental or my spiritual. Those were the two things I concentrated on. And I just tried to get as much knowledge as I could. But as I started to recognize the importance of finding balance within those 4 quadrants, it helped me on my own journey to be a survivor. And that's what I call myself now. I call myself a survivor. And I guess I would call myself an activist just based on the things I've done over the years.